To begin with, we will be starting with the national anthem as it is the tradition of the Bombay Stock Exchange, BSE.
हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्छल जलधि तरंगा तब शुभ नामे जागे तब शुभ आशीष मांगे गाहे तब जय गाथा जन गण मंगलदायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता जय हे जय हे
Thank you very much. We're really happy to see so much of crowd coming today because today being an auspicious day of Anant Chaturdashi, and yes, everybody has braved out to come against the traffic in town. So thank you very much for that. This is really interesting times when we've seen a lot of changes happening in India with respect to the capital market reforms, and one, the latest being the Sahu Committee report, which is changing the DR regulations. Today, exactly that is our topic, and we have some of the speakers who are actually the members of the Sahu Committee. It's really a pleasure to partner along with the Bombay Stock Exchange, the BSE Limited, and Pivot Management to host this first time ever a seminar on depository receipts called Deposit. So, may I now ask Mr. Ashish Chavan to give the welcome address?
Many thanks, Aparna. Thank you, everyone, for coming today. I know it's a tough day, and all of you want to go home early. At least you have sort of a worry about going home, the traffic situation, and so on. So, I really appreciate your coming today. I would also like to thank Mr. Sanjeev Kaushik, who has come for 3 hours to Mumbai from Delhi. He works for as director in the Department of Economic Affairs. Mr. Sahu, who was the chairman of the Sahu Committee, for which we have gathered here to discuss. Dr. Ajay Shah, who is a professor at NIPFP, the National Institute of Public Finance and Policy, and he was also a member of the Sahu Committee. Mr. Christopher Kearns, he's the CEO of the Depository Receipts Bank of New York Mellon. Mr. Neil Atkinson, head of Asia Pacific Depository Receipt Bank of New York Mellon. Mr. Anish Kumar, country executive BNY Mellon, India, and Mr. Viraj Kulkarni, who runs Pivot. And Viraj used to work for the BSE when it used to be called Bombay Stock Exchange. Basically, when we were discussing the Sahu Committee report when it came out, we had a lot of hopes. But then it took some time for the government to accept, and then we decided to start talking about it to everyone, including India and abroad. Many people asked me, saying this is going to directly affect the BSE's business, because if people come and list on New York Stock Exchange or on Luxembourg or Singapore or wherever, then why is BSE trying to market it? And I've always been saying that BSE has tried to bring capital to the Indian companies, whether it is from India or abroad. And whether you list on BSE or not, my first job is to get the capital to Indian companies so that they can grow. And wherever they get good valuation, good investors, they would like to go. So this is basically an attempt by BSE, and it has always been there for last 140 years. BSE was set up as a Native Share and Stockbrokers Association in 1875. It's in 140th year. And it was Native Share and Stockbroker Association as opposed to British. Till 1925, if you were non-Indian, if you were a British, you couldn't become even a member, okay? And imagine we were being ruled by Britishers. They were not allowing us to get into many compounds, many places, but this was one place where Britishers were not allowed. And it's around 10 years elder to Indian National Congress. And it's around 65-year or 63-year elder to Reserve Bank of India and so on and so forth. Why I'm giving you this perspective is that BSE always had the interest of India at heart and not its own interest. If we can also do things along with India, it's fine. But effectively, this place is for India. And that's where, of course, you can hear some of the firecrackers, because the BSE Ganpati is now, we also have Ganpati always in BSE. So that is now going for Visarjan. So that's why you might have a little bit of disturbances. But I think we have to manage it today. So thank you very much for coming. And we have the stalwarts who have been part of this committee, and also from Ministry of Finance who have come here to explain to us what they are doing. And of course from experts from BNY Mellon who will tell us what's happening in the rest of the world. So thank you very much for coming, and hope we'll complete this sooner than you expect. Thank you very much.
May I request Mr. Sanjeev Kaushik, the Director of Capital Markets at Department of Economic Affairs at Ministry of Finance, to give some of his speech.
Thank you. So I'll start from where Ashish left off by saying that we hope this will end sooner than we expected. But my apologies, I came here on very short notice representing my boss, Dr. K.P. Krishnan, whom most of you are familiar with. He's a familiar face here in Bombay Stock Exchange and in the capital markets indeed. So I'm filling in his very big shoes. And I don't have any prepared notes, but I have been a member of the committee which was chaired by Mr. Sahu, and Mr. Ajay Shah will be speaking shortly as well. So we will go into those details. I thought maybe it would be appropriate for me, since I'm starting off and kicking off the discussions, to keep it slightly broader and talk about a number of the measures and a number of the reforms, a number of the initiatives that we in the Department of Economic Affairs and the Finance Ministry have been engaged with over the last year or more, and give you a quick update on where we are at in some of those, and then maybe you will have detailed queries later on during the question-answer session. So let me start off by taking you back to June, July last year, when we were all in the middle of some kind of a crisis, when the rupee was depreciating massively, if I may use the word, and we were faced with the prospect of outflows, which had to be stemmed. And the finance minister at that stage called us for putting into place emergency measures. Dr. Raghuram Rajan was at that time chief economic advisor in the ministry. He had not yet gone to the Reserve Bank. And this was also a time when we had just initiated some of the important changes as far as SEBI regulations were concerned, as far as foreign investors were concerned. What were some of these important changes that had come through at that time? If you recall, the KM Chandrasekhar committee had just submitted its report in June, July last year. And that was the time when the new FPI, the Foreign Portfolio Investor Scheme, had been introduced to replace the early terminology of FII, QFI, etc. And I just wanted to recapitulate a little bit about some of those changes. The FPI regime, from all the feedback that we in the ministry have been getting, has been very well received in the market, mainly because, as you know, and this is, I'm conscious, that an audience which is not necessarily directly impacted, but some of you are interested in that. The main changes were, it made the process of coming in and registration of foreign investors much more easy in terms of documentation. No longer are you required as a foreign investor to register with SEBI. Your account opening and diligence and KYC, every other formality is taken care of by the AD Bank where you're opening the account. So life has become hopefully much more easy for the foreign portfolio investors who are coming in. And this happened last year. This was also accompanied by changes to the KYC norms. So we moved to 3 categories of KYC to make the process simpler and to make documentation easier. There was a low risk, moderate risk, and high risk categorization of foreign investors. And all the feedback that we are receiving, last week we were in London talking to foreign investors, that life has indeed become simpler. It could, of course, be much better, but we are working towards that. So in July last year, this was the first important change that we undertook, the FPI regime. At the same time, we also freed up, we moved, as far as government securities were concerned, to a regime of first come, first served from the previous system that we had in terms of quota allocations and auctions. And that also was an important step. And suddenly, lo and behold, we were required to put together a program to attract more inflows into the country and stem the outflows that were happening. So we were tasked with putting together the current account deficit master plan, which then the minister actually laid out before the Houses of Parliament, and that got approved. There were some important changes in that. Namely, the Reserve Bank of India introduced a scheme called the FCNR-B deposit scheme. There was a bank recapitalization scheme which was launched. These two together were able to ensure that we received huge inflows. If I remember correctly, of the order of 37 billion came in by November that year. And this way we were able to arrest the downswing in the rupee, if you like, and we were able to limit the depreciation that happened. Now, why is all this important, and why do I want to build the context? Because this was the time, I know that probably we in government, but definitely we as Indians work best when we are faced with a crisis. And this was one of those kind of crises where we were able to institute a number of mechanisms, a number of measures which otherwise would have taken us probably years, if not decades, to put forth. And some of you will recognize the following measures that I will speak about. At that time, we were able to put together the Sahu Committee, which has subsequently submitted its report. And the mandate of the committee was, in the first phase, to look at the depository receipt scheme, which is what we are discussing today. Now, the depository receipt scheme, Bank of New York Mellon is here, Boni is here today. They've been market participants like yourselves, depositories, bankers, brokers, had been lobbying with us, talking to us for years about some of the changes. So, for example, one of the demands was level 1, allow level 1 DRs, allow unsponsored DRs. And some of these measures, some of these reforms, if I may use the word, have been indeed recommended by the Sahu Committee, and hopefully they will soon be implemented. So the Sahu Committee's report was presented to us a couple of months ago. I just wanted to also update you as to where we are at. In the budget speech in July this year, my finance minister has already outlined before Parliament that we are working at liberalizing the depository receipt scheme, and it will be implemented very soon. There were some tax-related changes, amendments that were required in the Income Tax Act that at that time in the budget could not be made, but the hope is that, and we are working towards implementing those in the next budget when it comes through in February. But that is as far as the tax-related amendments are concerned. The scheme itself is ready. We have taken on board the comments and concerns of various regulators, various agencies like SEBI, RBI, Ministry of Corporate Affairs. And now the plan is, if all goes well, to notify the actual scheme as far as the Ministry of Finance is concerned under the executive powers of government. And then the tax-related changes could perhaps follow later on. So we have currently sought the advice of the Ministry of Legal Affairs, and if everything goes well and they concur, then we will be hopefully in a position to notify the DR scheme that we are discussing today in the next few 2 to 3 months. And looking forward to that, and I'm sure all of you are eagerly expecting that as well. So as far as the liberalization is concerned, that was started in the last crisis, and on the path that we embarked, this was the first important, according to me, milestone that is in the process of being achieved. Then the next small thing which might have missed attention that we put in place was, if some of you will recall, in November we came out with a circular on allowing unlisted companies to list abroad. Of course, there were some clauses in that which had to be subsequently discussed and changed. But basically, we decided to allow unlisted companies to list abroad, not through direct equity listing, but through the DR mechanism. This was a pilot scheme which has been put into operation for 2 years, and then depending on the results and depending on the experience of the next 2 years, we may review and like to continue or discontinue the scheme depending on what the experience is. There were some suggestions of that, so we've made one subsequent amendment changing that scheme and allowing companies to who fulfill the norms and the requirements of the foreign exchanges and the foreign regulators to not necessarily have to comply with SEBI's requirements. And there is no condition now to mandatorily list abroad, list in India simultaneously or in a subsequent period of 3 years or whatever it is. So that was another important initiative that we had. I'm not going into the details of the DR scheme because my colleagues will be talking about that, but the second phase of the SAHU committee has also come out, and we've received the report on the Bharat depository receipts, the IDRs of yore, if you recall. There are some important recommendations in that, in the hope that we will be able to kickstart that product and the market for Bharat depository receipts will take off in a big way. That scheme is currently under consultation. We are awaiting comments from the regulators and the concerned stakeholders, and hopefully we will be in a position to notify that scheme very quickly. And that will be another product to look forward to in terms of making flows easier, making it easier for companies, either domestic or foreign, to access the investors in whichever location they decide is best for them. The other things, some of the other things that in the ministry, in the capital markets division that we are working with currently are, we are working on liberalizing the ECB framework of external commercial borrowing. In fact, the committee in its phase 2 is looking at the external commercial borrowing framework, and hopefully very soon we will be in a position also to make the final changes or recommendations to that. This is also something that forms a part of the finance minister's budget speech, which he gave in July this year. He has specifically talked about liberalizing of the ECB framework, and hopefully in this financial year itself, the ECB framework will also be implemented. There's one or two other things that I will spend a quick minute on, although it may not be directly relevant to this audience. We are trying to also make it easier for international settlement and clearing of Indian securities, debt securities to begin with. So we've been in touch, we've been in discussions with Euroclear for the last several months. And we've reached a stage where now we are formulating a specific proposal. Probably initially to begin with, we will open some portion of the FII limit in G-SECs for Euroclear settlement. But that is under consultation, and the final shape of it will be decided soon. But the intention again is the very same continuing theme from last year, from the crisis, of liberalization, of making processes and products simpler, and of making it easier for investors and corporates, both to raise funds and also to invest in some of these securities. The one other thing that was instituted this year, late last year, this year, was the Standing Council on the Competitiveness of the Indian Financial Sector. That is a very important landmark initiative for us, and it will, I think, start becoming visible soon. The reason for that is that we are very conscious that we need to make the market more competitive with international markets in terms of various small operational mechanical issues, in terms of transaction costs, of, let's say, timings of operations or markets being open to investors. So there are so many things. In fact, the IGIDR, Indira Gandhi Institute, which is working on preparing the final report for this council, which will meet at the end of this month, is in the process of finalizing the report on equity derivatives, currency, and commodity derivatives. So the hope is that we will be able to reform and deepen the market for some of these derivatives, equity, currency, and commodities. And you will hear about that pretty soon. So these are some of the initiatives and reform measures that we in the ministry have been working on. I'm going to be here for questions and answers, but I think I'll hand over back to you, and we can talk about the DR scheme in detail as we go on. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Kaushik, for a giving us an overview of the capital markets reforms and what we can expect, plus some timelines along that. There will be some time after the sessions for question and answers, so please reserve your questions for the last. May I now request Mr. M.S. Sahu to kind of take us through his presentation.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I must thank Bombay Stock Exchange for giving me an opportunity to present the work done by the Ministry of Finance Committee on depository receipts. In fact, I must also thank Ministry of Finance for giving us the opportunity to work on this, and all the members of the committee who have contributed to come up with an excellent framework for both the depositories, American depository receipts and Bharata depository receipts. In particular, I must thank Mr. Sanjeev Kaushik, who has been the convener of this committee, and Dr. Ajay Saha, who headed the research team and provided, in fact, his team under his leadership drafted the reports of both the committees. So I must thank both Mr. Kaushik and Dr. Saha for this. Let me start with the question which Ashish asked, what is there for BSE? I think a stock exchange is there just to connect the investors with investees. And this is what precisely the reports of both ADR and GDR aim to. They intend to connect the investors in one jurisdiction with investee in another jurisdiction. In particular, while we are talking about ADR, GDR, we have also spoken about Indian depository receipts, which have direct business relationship with Bombay Stock Exchange, in the sense that IDRs/BHDRs can be listed on Bombay Stock Exchange, and it would provide additional opportunity to Bombay Stock Exchange to service the investors in India. In fact, this committee has gone a step further. It has recommended trading of Bharata depository receipts in India. It has also recommended the trading of foreign depository receipts like ADR, GDRs on Indian Stock Exchange. That means a depository receipt issued in America on the shares of a Singapore company will also be available for trading on BSE or for Indian investors. So I find not only it will help BSE to discharge its responsibility of connecting investors with investees, even it makes business sense for BSE, since these will make new products available on BSE. Let me start with the basic objectives. As I told, this is an effort to connect investors in one jurisdiction with issuers in another jurisdiction, essentially to push the frontiers of trade beyond the economies. We are talking about ADRs, which connects investors overseas with the Indian issuers, and we are talking about IDRs, which connects Indian investors with the companies or issuers overseas. This committee has looked at refining or rationalizing the connectivity, how to make this connectivity smooth, frictionless, so that the economic agents have full freedom to do the transactions without any state intervention. And this has done so keeping in view the contemporary thought process, changed macroeconomic environment, and changed legal environment and the financial markets. Those who have seen these two reports would have seen that these reports are very simply written, particularly in the form of questions and answers. All that you can have a query in your mind to understand this, you will find almost all the questions are, there is a kind of FAQ pattern of the report. And the draft schemes have also been given to government, in the sense government does not have to start work afresh in terms of drafting. Ready-made output these two reports give. And what I will be presenting is essentially the majority view, though there are minor differences in the opinion among the members of the committee. I will be essentially presenting the majority view in the report. let me start with the objectives. As Sanjay mentioned that, we have been talking about to handle the crisis time. In fact, while crisis is important or crisis provides an opportunity to look at major reforms, we have looked at in terms of major long-term policy implications. We started as a part of capital control regime reforms in early 90s in the form of access through DR route to the overseas investors. Now, in the last 20 years, we have a much developed onshore market, and now we believe that the availability of offshore market provides huge competition to onshore market, and that makes our onshore market very competitive. And our onshore market is so competitive now that we are looking at other companies coming and issuing Indian depository receipts here. We are now looking at it is left for the domestic firms to evaluate whether the onshore market in India serves his needs better or the offshore markets overseas serves his needs better. Similar also is the question of a foreign firm. The foreign firm is evaluating whether the overseas market is more competitive vis-a-vis India's onshore market. So one of the objectives of this work is that we provide a competitive onshore market. If you open up an efficient offshore market, that puts pressure on onshore market to improve. This also addresses the concerns of home buyers in the sense that all of us have a preference to buy the securities in our own market. Because I feel that if I buy in Indian securities, if I get into problem, I know that there's a regulatory framework, regulators, courts here in the system which I can access. That is why most of the investors have their portfolios, have bias for domestic securities, which DRs provide an opportunity. Beyond this, opening up the market, both DR, ADR, and GDR, that provides global choices to our domestic firms, our investors, our financial service providers. So our firms can now look at getting the international financial services, the capital at the international or least possible cost, while the investor has the option of getting a much wider choice for building a portfolio or even getting better returns. And most importantly, as we believe that the capital market provides an opportunity to go beyond one's ability, in the sense that I, as an individual, my ability to save is not limited by my ability to invest, but by the ability of the economy to invest. Similarly, this would provide now the ability of India to save or invest is not limited by India's ability to invest and save, but by the global ability to invest and save. So these are the basic 3 or 4 objectives which prompted us to look at refining the depository receipts framework. We followed certain principles. The following principles guided us in our work. We took capital control regime as given for us. Though there is enough scope to improve the capital control regime, but we didn't touch that. We thought of having a flexible scheme for both kinds of DRs, which will work well under the changing capital control regime. But within the capital control regime, we thought of we must provide the complete suite of products, while all the economic agents, there are 4 economic agents we are talking about: domestic firms, domestic investors, foreign firms, and foreign investors. All of them must have complete choice, freedom of choice. Let a domestic firm decide whether it would like to raise resources from within the country or overseas country. The state has no reason to come up with any intervention which distorts its choice. Only intervention we could think of is in respect of investor protection, in respect of only Bharat depository receipts. For ADR, we do not find that kind of justification, and we believe that states should not provide any kind of privilege, restriction, support, or discourage any mode of raising resources either by a farm or any way of channelizing resources from the investors to the farm. And while we are looking at ADR, we also looked at domestic depository receipts. We have designed the domestic depository receipts commensurate with a kind of mirror replica of the ADR. We are living in a reciprocal world. We can't expect that America would give us a better treatment than we would give the treatment to American investors or American firms. So our depository receipt scheme has to be more or less comparable with the ADR, GDR we are allowing, and it has to be competitive with the depository market overseas so that we are really able to attract foreign firms to this country. We are proposing no specific approval is required for either ADR or BHDR. Any approval required, let's say, we are talking about depository receipts on certain securities. Depository receipts are issued on the back of certain securities. If the issue of that security requires any approval, let that approval be there. But just because we are issuing depository receipts on those securities, that should not require any approval. If we are issuing securities to foreigners, that requires certain approval under FEMA. That we do not dispense with. But we do not propose any approval specifically for issue of the depository receipts. We are proposing a neutral taxation regime. We are conscious that since these two markets are interlinked, market outside is interlinked to domestic market, both ADR and BHDR in terms of fungibility, there is a possibility of using the DR or market for DR to abuse the market in Indian market or the vice versa. One can, let's say, an Indian company listed here on BSE has DRs listed on NYSE. There's a possibility that the DRs on NYSE could be manipulated, which can have effect on Indian market, or there's a fear of money laundering. We are conscious about these things. So taking care, on noticing these concerns, we have provided a mechanism to address these concerns. And particularly for the IDR part, BHDR part, we are suggesting that there should be only one regulator responsible, and that regulator should intervene only for investor protection, and that should intervene only through regulations. Regulation is the only mode of subordinate legislation through which the regulator must intervene. This is essentially what we are proposing. We are proposing that a domestic investor, Ramlal, he can invest the shares of IBM or any other kind of security. IBM is the foreign firm. It can be foreign government. It can be a foreign mutual fund. So Ramlal can invest directly in IBM, can invest in the IBM through IDRs. He has also the same option to invest in TCS shares directly as well as on ADRs on TCS shares. Similarly, John can invest in IBM shares directly and through IDRs. He can also invest in TCS shares directly in Indian market or through ADRs. IBM has the option to raise money from Ramlal directly through shares or IDRs. TCS has also the option to raise money from John through shares or ADRs. And we do not propose any kind of restriction on these four entities. Because as long as, let's say, for example, our capital control regime allows Ramlal to invest in IDRs. Let's say Ramlal is allowed under our capital control regime to invest in certain specified financial assets overseas. Let's say the shares of IBM. If we provide him an opportunity to invest in IDRs on the shares of IBM, we do not see any extra consideration, extra reason for state to intervene. It is for Ramlal to choose whether DR serves his purpose better or the shares of IBM serves better, as long as he is investing within the capital control regime. If a capital control regime allows him to invest up to 125,000 in the certain specified financial instruments, let him do directly or through DR route. Our capital control regime allows mutual funds to make investments, allows certain listed companies to make investments, and it has specified certain instruments which can be invested. And we are proposing that within the limits allowed for them to invest, let them invest directly on DRs or the shares, but the sum total of the investment shall not exceed 125,000. Let me talk about, we have used 4 terms before I go to this scheme. We have used, in our scheme we have drafted, we have used the term permissible securities for ADRs. We are saying that if a foreigner can, just the opposite of BHDR, if a foreigner can invest in Indian shares, let us allow him to invest in depository receipts issued on Indian shares. So all those instruments which are available to foreigners directly should also be available through DR route. That means we are saying that let there be DRs on a set of securities which we call permissible securities, and by permissible securities we mean the securities defined under the Securities Contracts Regulations Act. For example, we are talking about government debt, government securities. So we have, let's say, allowed 30 billion, up to 30 billion investment in government securities. So let him invest directly in government securities or on DRs on government securities, but sum total of the investment of all the foreign investors in India shall not exceed 30 billion in government securities. So for the purpose of ADRs, our permissible securities means securities as defined in CRA that includes shares, bonds, debentures, rights or interests in securities, government securities, derivatives in securities, and similar instruments issued by private companies also. But only difference, only restriction, we are putting 2 restrictions on that. One is that security must be available or may be acquired by a foreign investor, non-resident Indian under the FEMA, and these securities are in DMAT form. Similarly, we are talking about permissible securities for BHDRs. It is a little beyond the IDRs. IDRs, as you know, defined in the Companies Act, means a depository receipt issued on the back of equities only, equities of a company only, and with the approval of the company. We are going much beyond that. We are not limiting to equity. It can be debt. It's not limited to company. It can be government. It can be mutual fund. And we are not limiting to the approval of the company. It can be sponsored, unsponsored, with the approval, without the approval. But if without approval, we have certain concerns, but we are allowing all those. And we are saying that let there be Bharat depository receipts on the full set of securities which can be acquired by Indians under the FEMA. So we are defining permissible securities to mean the equities of foreign companies and any other financial asset that may be acquired by a resident Indian under FEMA, but subject to 2 more restrictions that DMAT requirement is a basic requirement for us. This is an investor protection measure. This is necessary for investigation. This is necessary for knowing how much of headroom available for fungibility. But one more important aspect we are looking at from investor protection perspective is that these permissible securities must be listed on an international stock exchange so that there is some screening at the overseas, as well as we are requiring that those must also, the Bharat depository receipts on those permissible securities must be listed on Indian stock exchange. So there are screening at 2 levels. Third point we are talking about is that permissible jurisdiction. In both cases, BHDR and ADR, we are looking at permissible jurisdiction. That means an issuer from permissible jurisdiction can issue BHDR here, and an Indian company can issue ADRs in a permissible jurisdiction. By permissible jurisdiction, we mean a foreign jurisdiction which is a member of the FATA, Financial Action Task Force on Money Laundering, and the securities regulator of that jurisdiction is a member of IOSCO or has a bilateral understanding with the Securities and Exchange Board of India. These are essentially necessary to ensure that these overseas authorities cooperate with us when some need arises and they are willing to share the information with us. And we are talking about the international stock, international exchange. This is important in the context of BHDRs. We are saying that it must be listed on an overseas exchange before getting listed here. Though we are not very particular that DRs issued by Indian companies must also be listed on Indian International Stock Exchange, though there is a difference of opinion among the members of the committee. We are defining International Stock Exchange to mean a platform for trading of securities in a permissible jurisdiction, is accessible to public for trading, and it provides both pre-trade and post-trade transparency to public. Okay, now I'm coming to BHDR framework. As I told, BHDR is much more expansive than IDR. We are also proposing the foreign depository receipts to be traded in India. And as I stated earlier, these BHDRs can be capital raising, non-capital raising, may be sponsored, may not be sponsored, and we are not particular about the mode of issue or transfer of either permissible securities or the depository receipts. That means let an Indian company issue permissible securities to a foreign depository in any mode permissible under ICDR regulations. And let the foreign depository issue ADRs, sorry, I'm talking about BHDR, but it's the reverse position. Let the foreign depository issue ADRs in American market in any permissible mode permissible in that jurisdiction. So we are not on that. As regards issue size, for BHDR, we have suggested that let it be at least the 20%, it should be the 25% of the permissible securities. We do not intend this to go up to 100%. That would mean that essentially the market is here, not elsewhere. But we are talking about more important part is we are talking about the two-way fungibility. Today we have slightly truncated form of fungibility. It's available after 1 year, fungible up to 25%. There are quotas in fungibility, retail, non-retail. There are quarterly limits on fungibility. We are proposing fungibility from day one and 100%. There was a view that if you allow that kind of full fungibility, it is possible that the liquidity may dry up. If more than 60, 70, 80% of the BHDRs are converted to Indian securities, are converted to foreign securities, so there's a possibility that there will be no liquidity. But we, as a committee, we felt that that's not a concern for us because the investor, in any case, has an exit opportunity. Besides, there is always a scope for unsponsored BHDRs to come in. So let there be no limit on any fungibility, no end age restriction. As of now, we have the restriction that the money raised has to be invested at a particular place, either domestically or overseas. We are saying that no such requirement is required. As of now, we do not allow the money to be invested in India. Rather, we would encourage that if money raised through BHDRs are invested in India, but that's not our preference. We have absolutely no end use restriction. No approval is required. And as regards investors, as I told, we have some concerns because these are the investors, Indian investors. So we are a little restrictive. While there can be any foreign issuer to issue BHDRs, except that he should not have been debarred or blacklisted by any authority. But as regards investor, we are looking at different categories of investors. First, we are looking at if it is a foreign depository receipts, or it is an unsponsored BHDRs, this should not be available for individual investors. The second we are looking at is that we are now trying to move away from one size fits all approach. As of now, the IDR rules allow only one kind of Indian depository receipts. we are proposing let there be many layers, many levels of depository receipts with different kinds of sophistication, different kinds of disclosure requirements, different kinds of regulatory burden. Certain varieties can be available only for sophisticated investors and certain available for retail investors. So retail investors should have no access to foreign depository receipts, no access to certain types of depository receipts, and should have no access to unsponsored retail depository receipts. But we are encouraging institutional investors to be allowed in a much larger way to participate in these markets. As of now, there are regulatory restrictions on, let's say, insurance funds or pension funds. So insurance regulation does not allow an insurance company to invest in BHDRs because the proceeds of that goes somewhere else, goes outside the country. We are proposing that let all insurance investors be freed, be allowed, even be encouraged to invest in depository receipts. And the foreign investors should also be allowed to manage the foreign exchange risk because these are rupee-denominated depository receipts. They must have access to these kinds of products. Except this, we have to, of course, look at that any investor debarred by SEBI should not be allowed to invest. Now I'm coming to the investor protection. As I told, this is the only reason for regulatory intervention. We are saying that as of now, we are very clear that IDRs are securities under the securities laws. It's a slightly gray area whether Bharat depository receipts can be securities, are securities as of now. But to make it more clear, we are suggesting that let central government declare these to be securities. There is a specific power available for central government. So that once it is security, all protection available to securities will be available for investors in securities. Let SEBI be the exclusive regulator. In the recent SEBI amendment, which came on 25th August 2014, SEBI has been given slightly more powers about the extraterritorial jurisdiction. Particularly, it has been enabled to get into MOUs with the securities regulators overseas. We are proposing a little more territorial jurisdiction to be given to SEBI. As of now, we have no legal doubt, but to put things, make it much more explicit, we are saying that some more explicit provisions should be there. As I stated earlier, there should be multiple levels of Bharat depository receipts. Certain categories are not available for retail individual investors. The two other requirements that the permissible securities are listed overseas as well as listed here. And we are having issuers only from permissible jurisdiction because of the concerns of money laundering and market abuse. Issuers debarred elsewhere are not allowed to access the market. And we are putting certain specific obligations on custodians and depositories. They will comply with these requirements as regards SEBI is concerned. For the ADR, American Depository Receipts Framework, we are saying, again, let any issuer, any Indian issuer, irrespective of his track record of performance, theoretically, securities market allows anybody, everybody to access the security market. SEBI does not prohibit anybody. It prescribes the eligibility requirement. And if you do not meet the eligibility requirement, you have to go through a different route. So we are saying that let anybody issue the depository receipts ADRs, except the one who has been debarred by SEBI, because if we allow him, he can issue DRs which can be converted to Indian securities, which will get back to Indian market. Similarly, let any investor, any resident, non-resident invest in ADR. As I discussed about the any underlying permissible securities, again, those can be capital raising sponsored. The important point we are talking that this need not be listed overseas. As Mr. Kaushik was mentioning recently, they have allowed unlisted companies for, they have given a 2-year time frame that they can issue the securities abroad without listing. And the committee feels that this need not be listed elsewhere. This will be issued in permissible jurisdiction. We are agnostic about the issue and transfer mode. Issue size, no restriction except to the extent as permissible in capital control regime. Two-way fungibility, similar logic. No end use restriction and no approval is required. So the committee has essentially tried to, both these products need harmonization of 5 laws. securities law, company law, taxation, FEMA, and PMLA. The schemes we have drafted, we believe has harmonized these for the concerns of the 5 authorities dealing with the 5 laws. And Finance Minister has in the budget proposed that I propose to liberalize ADR, GDR regime to allow issuance of deposit receipts on all permissible securities. And I propose to completely revamp the Indian deposit receipts and introduce a much more liberal and ambitious Bharat deposit receipts. This is where we stand. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sahu, for taking us through the committee recommendation. I'm sure there will be a lot of questions and answers at the end of the session. May I now request Dr. Ajay Shah, Professor at the National Institute of Public Finance and Policy, and also a Sahu committee member, to please give his thoughts.
I thank Ashish and Mr. Sahu for putting this show together. I would like to talk a bit about the larger picture of Indian economic thinking, which has brought us here, which has given us the kind of thought process that you see in this committee report, and that I think will increasingly influence and modify many other things that we see around us. To take you back, all of us remember a time when we in India had central planning and government would pretty much tell you what to do. So on all sorts of things, there was an extensive and intrusive involvement of the government, which would almost capriciously instruct the private sector on modifying the product and modifying the process. And that was the way things worked in Indian socialism. And all of us know that that worked really badly, because in most situations, it is the energy and the dynamism and the creativity of the private sector which knows best how to design a product, how to design a process. And we need to think differently about the role of government. And for many years, there was a lack of clarity about this. We like to believe that we don't do central planning anymore, and we don't want government control anymore, and we want something called regulation, but we were never quite too clear what is regulation. And every now and then, regulation just turned into meddling. It turned into micromanagement. It turned into a government giving instructions to private players, you can do this, you can't do this, and so on. Over the years, I think we are developing an increasing clarity about how to think about these questions. And I think that the very big milestone which has helped in clarifying this situation was the work of Justice Sri Krishna's Financial Sector Legislative Reforms Commission. The useful way to think about this is extremely simple. Rule number 1, everything that the private sector does is fine. That by default, the government should not be interfering in everything. Rule number 2, the legitimate zone for interference by the government lies in market failures. And these are a narrow and defined class of problems. So everything in the world of finance should be unregulated, should be governed by the thoughts and the decisions of private players, other than 4 areas where there are market failures. In the field of finance, there are 4 market failures. They are consumer protection. As all of us know, many times financial firms are known to be unfair to hapless consumers. The second is microprudential regulation. This is about financial firms that take on too much risk. The shareholders of a firm have a call option payoff and have an incentive to take very high risk. And if the firm blows up, they don't pay the full consequences because this spills over to other people in society. So you need the interference of a government to force financial firms to take a little less risk. The third is systemic risk, where you want to undertake certain interventions to reduce the probability of an economy-wide collapse of the very working of financial markets. Okay? And the fourth is a field called resolution, where you want the government to have a capability to be able to preemptively move in and harmoniously close down a failing financial firm. Okay? So consumer protection, microprudential regulation, systemic risk regulation, and resolution. These are 4 areas where there are market failures. These are the only 4 areas where there are market failures. And in every other place, the meddling of the government is illegitimate and inappropriate. Now, this is a very valuable and powerful and important and a relatively new way of thinking in India. So as an example, let's think about an Indian company that issues depository receipts in New York, okay, or in London. Question 1, consumer protection. Okay, so this is an Indian company that is going to issue in London. The consumer is in London. It is the job of the authorities in London to worry about fair play and the good treatment of consumers in London. It is not our problem. It is not the problem of the government of India. So consideration 1, namely consumer protection, leads to no case for any interference, any restrictions, any involvement of the Indian government on the issuance of a depository receipt in London. Consideration 2, microprudential regulation. Okay, here nothing changes. If an Indian insurance company is buying shares, nothing changes in whether he buys shares of Reliance listed in India or shares of Reliance that are traded in London or in New York. The risk characteristics are the same. So there is no change in any thinking on microprudential regulation. Consideration 3, systemic risk. There is absolutely nothing that can happen related to a depository receipt which has anything to do with systemic risk in India. Consideration 4, resolution. Okay, when you want to shut down a failing Indian firm, when you want to shut down a failing Indian financial firm, there is no change in how you would want to think about it based on whether it is participating in the depository receipt market or not. Therefore, all interventions by the government of India in the depository receipt market are illegitimate and inappropriate and should go. And that's what gives you the Sahu Committee report. Okay, so this is the logical way to think about it. What we have done for too many years in India is we start with the default assumption that the government is all powerful and can meddle as much as it likes. And that has got us into innumerable difficulties on achieving high economic growth and a mature market economy. We should push back. In most areas, the meddling of the government is inappropriate and should not be accepted. We have these meetings all too often where there are 10 people in a room and there is some discussion about public policy, and each one in the room has some 3 pet ideas that wouldn't it be better if we interfered in X fashion. And reasonable men who are chairmen try to find a middle road and try to find some kind of average of all the voices in the room. And we end up getting one interventionist idea after another. And I think that we really need to think clearly. And in all this, it will be a huge step forward for us when the Indian Financial Code is enacted by Parliament, because these kind of ideas will then become law. They will become the primary law, and they will give us a fundamental improvement in the working of the financial system. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shah, for really sharing us these progressive ideas about the committee. May I now request Mr. Christopher Kearns, CEO of Depository Receipts at BNY Mellon, to give us an overview as well as the global depository market. Chris?
I'm only going to make a few comments, and if I got up and walked over there, it would probably double the amount of time I'm on the stage. First of all, thank you to everyone, to the BSE, of course, to the Ministry, to Pivot, and of course to Mr. Sahu for bringing us all here with a very, very good reason. My name is Chris Kearns, and I'm the global head of the BNY Mellon depository receipt business and team. I've been a very regular visitor to India over the years. In fact, I made my first visit to India almost 30 years ago. Yes, it was when I was 5 years old, I'm sure you're thinking. That was not a business trip, but several years later I found myself living in Hong Kong and visiting India very often, every year. And whilst India certainly is a country of great tradition, and we're seeing much of that today on the streets of Mumbai. It's a very auspicious day to be here. It's also a country of great change, of course. But I would reflect that in all of the years that I have been coming, I haven't, to comment on the previous speaker's comments, that I've never seen a time of such pace of change and a real change in the dynamism of, you might say, the interplay of business and government, which is very, very refreshing. So I'm very, very honored to be here at this great time. BNY Mellon, for those of you that don't know, we are, whilst talking of tradition, a 230-year-old financial institution, in fact, the oldest bank in the United States. But we have changed a great deal over that time as well. And today, we really focus on two core business areas, which I would summarize as investment management, and secondly, investment services. And a big part of our investment services business is our depository receipt business, our ADR and GDR business. And we have been present here in India in that regard since the introduction of the original ADR GDR scheme in 1993. I'm going to just give you some brief background as to the wider depository receipt market industry, business this year, just to try to put things into some perspective before my far more talented colleague speaks a little bit more about India. The first half of 2014 saw the highest level of DR capital raisings of any year in the last 3 years. In fact, very close to all-time highs, which is interesting when you consider some of the backdrop over the last 2 or 3 years globally. We saw 41 capital market transactions around the world in DR form, raising more than $9 billion. In fact, that statistic alone is already 3 times the amount of capital that was raised in the previous 6 months. The majority of these DR transactions were from emerging markets. Not India this year, but certainly from emerging markets around the world have been incredibly active. From a trading volume point of view, we saw 75 billion depository receipts, 75 billion depository receipts changing hands, valued at more than 1.5 trillion US dollars. There are now more than 3,700 companies with DR programs around the world for investors to buy. And just to maybe give some very current color to the importance and relevance of depository receipts in the capital markets, we only have to look at a transaction that is on the road right now for a company called Alibaba in China. And I'm seeing some nods around the room. It's a story that has made the press everywhere for sure. That transaction, and we don't want to prejudge, but I will simply tell you what I have read, is likely to be the largest IPO ever of any asset class from any market, potentially raising as much as 21 or 22 billion US dollars. Why does this matter to us and to this panel? Well, certainly in this industry, because the entirety of that transaction, in fact, will be in depository receipts. The only instrument that Alibaba will be selling to global investors will be ADRs. So still, as that demonstrates, a very, very relevant product in the global capital markets. So just to wrap up, my comments at least, coming back to India. You know, over the last few months, India has shown some spectacular performance stemming from some spectacular change. Very encouraging GDP growth, of course, close to 6% for the last quarter. Markets, of course, have also performed very, very well. We were just upstairs on the floor of the exchange, and I can see that I need to update my statistics here. It says 27,000. I can tell you that it's 27,320 or thereabouts as of this afternoon. As a result, global funds from around the world have invested or pumped in $13 billion into Indian equities since the beginning of this year. All very, very, very positive signs. And of course, as we've just heard, India has been embarking on some very bold and very, very progressive liberalization of its capital markets regulations, not least the work of the Sahu Committee. So thank you very much to everyone. On that note, I would just like to introduce my colleague, Neil Atkinson, who I will save your legs this time, Aparna. Neil Atkinson, who is the managing director responsible for our business in Asia Pacific and based in Hong Kong. In fact, he was a successor of mine, I'm very pleased to say. He's been doing that particular job for about 100 days. So maybe we will compare his performance with that of the Modi government. But I would not be the one to do that. But what I would say is that what brought him to that position is some very, very focused work in the last 3 years, almost exclusively actually on India with our Indian team, working on essentially the liberalization of the DR market here, which has culminated in the work with Mr. Sahu. So congratulations for that, and Neil Atkinson.